Do you, as a jiu-jitsu athlete, need to do plyometric training? It's actually a really good question, because when you actually look at the sport of gi and no-gi jiu-jitsu, you don't see there is a lot of movement that requires very fast ground contact time, or just very fast and rapid movements like you would see in striking arts like boxing. Sure, being a faster wrestler, or even just faster in your stand-up game with crazy transitions can be an advantage, but the speed still pales in comparison to other sporting movements. Which begs the question of plyometrics and jiu-jitsu. And to answer it very succinctly, I believe yes, you should be doing some form of plyometric training. It just probably won't reach the same intensities and volumes as other sports that require very fast ground contact times. So let me define what plyometrics actually are, the adaptations you're looking to get from them, and then how you can program them so you can get the most out of them without destroying yourself. And everything's also detailed in my free Jiu-Jitsu strength conditioning blueprint that is down in the description. But if we're to define plyometric exercise, it's essentially a rapid eccentric to concentric muscle action. So just think of when you hit the ground, you have that eccentric or lengthening phase of typically the Achilles tendon, but we'll just say the calf muscle here for ease of use. And then as you propel yourself forward, you have a shortening of that tendon and that calf muscle. Very similar if you're doing a bicep curl, when you're lowering the weight, that's your eccentric phase, and then you curling it up as your concentric phase, lengthening and shortening to make it easy to understand. Now, if you take the traditional Michael Yes's definition, the man who brought plyometrics to the USA, he will say that ground contacts need to be under 250 milliseconds. So essentially a very fast and rapid change from eccentric to concentric. Now, often you'll see plyometrics, or often you'll see jumps lumped into plyometrics, and you'll see this categorization of fast stretch shortening cycle and slow stretch shortening cycle. Meaning fast stretch shortening cycle being that under 250 milliseconds, whereas that slow stretch shortening cycle being something like a vertical jump where you have more time, but still involves some kind of elastic energy use. But for the purpose of this video, I'll focus on what they call the fast stretch shortening cycle movements, which would be, for example, hurdle hops, drop jumps, pogos, and anything else that involves similar very short ground contact times. Because ideally you should be doing your jumps and your throws as a jiu-jitsu athlete anyway. So why perform plyometrics at all? And we're talking about these fast ground contact plyometrics. I'm just gonna check my notes here so I don't ruin anything here. But the first one is this graph I'm gonna show you right here. I've shown it many times by Comey, and it is the change in muscle length and then the change in force on the y-axis. You'll see that for a given change in muscle length, we have circles 1 to 2, and then we have this big jump to circle number 3, which is the excitatory mechanism, and this is the muscle spindles within the muscle. Now, it's very sensitive to the rate of stretch. So when we're doing plyometric training, we're getting a fast rate of stretch. We start to enhance the sensitivity of this excitatory mechanism, and ideally we're able to now produce more force for a given change in muscle length because of the addition of the excitation of these muscle spindles. That is an adaptation that you can gain from plyometric style training. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to get it from slower stretch shortening cycle training, but the fast rate of stretch is going to give you that too. We also have increases in muscle fascicle length. Talked about this at length on the channel too. Essentially, we have muscle fibers and bundles, and then we have muscle fibers essentially with blocks in a row. Ideally, we want to be able to increase the length of these muscle fibers, because the longer the muscle fiber, the faster it can contract. The faster it can contract, the more force we can produce quickly. So we want to be able to add these blocks of muscle fibers in a row. Plyometric training is one way we're able to achieve this adaptation. Secondly, we see decreases in pronation angle. Now, this kind of depends on the exercise being used. If you go deeper into the research on this, you'll see that you often find increases in pronation angle, but that's often with exercises that would not be considered fast stretch shortening cycle like in this video. But when you're doing just sprint and jump style training, you see decreases in pronation angle. And why is this important? We want the muscle fibers to be closer to the line of pull of the muscle, and that way, again, we get faster contractile velocity. Now, we're not trying to just do exercise to change pronation angle. I think this is one of those things where it's a byproduct of the training. It's not a specific adaptation we're trying to target, but I just want to give you an understanding of the adaptations that can occur from this, because there are advantages to having increased pronation angles, such as being able to handle high eccentric forces. But to our next adaptation, we can see potential increases in tendon stiffness. So essentially, we want to be very efficient movers. And being an efficient mover means we're not doing everything as a quote unquote muscular movement. We're using the tendinous structures and the elastic energy involved there to be able to help facilitate movement more economically. So if you think about jumping rope, very little movement's typically happening at the calf muscle. A lot of it is happening at the tendon. And that means we're actually saving energy as you bounce around the ring, especially if you're an amateur boxer, because you're able to use that springiness versus having to forcefully move your way around, quote unquote, muscularly. It also means you can transfer force more efficiently, since muscle and tendon are attached to bone to help you move. If you have a very compliant tendon or one that is not stiff, it means that you lose some of that force, reducing overall force production. A very good example of this in real time is sand training. You'll know, probably from experience, if you've been to the beach, you can't run or sprint as fast in sand as you can over grass or a track. The sand gives in, it actually dissipates a lot of that elastic energy, so you have to be more muscularly driven, and you'll probably feel that in your calves if you've ever done some kind of sand sprints. It's also one of the reasons why sand training typically isn't the best idea for athletes, unless, for example, you're in like a rehab stage of training and you're trying to target some kind of muscular change. And finally, all of this kind of comes together and helps us improve our rate of force development, or put very simply, produce more force faster. And the question becomes, does this even matter for the sport of jiu-jitsu? Not as much as other qualities, like literally just being strong and big, but I still think there are some benefits to having this, and just being generally more athletic is probably going to be better for you than not. So then how would I program these plyometrics so you can get the most out of them without going overboard and training more, say, like a speed athlete kind of striking art? Well, the first thing I would do is I like to progress on a continuum. And one of the worst mistakes you'll find people make when they start to incorporate plyometric training is they go straight into intense variations. Things like jumping on and off objects, doing a lot of really fast ground contact work at high intensities. And often this just leads to injury, soreness, and going to higher intensities too soon when you didn't really need to. So my continuum typically goes from performing higher volume, low amplitude, low intensity circuit-based work, and then progressing into single jumps, repeated jumps, and then into potentially more intense variations if you need it, but often probably not. Now, most of your time could honestly be spent in the circuit extensive style plyometric and jump training. It's going to give you a work capacity effect, so you're going to essentially get quote unquote fitter while doing it, and it's going to prepare you for the more intense variations down the line. Now, you can also start to improve your plyometric abilities just from these higher volume sets. Boxers have been doing it for years where they jump rope for however long, multiple times a week. It works. So a simple circuit might be pairing various pogo jumps or ankle pops. You might go on the spot, you might go forward, you might go backwards, you might go sideways. And in between sets of those, you might do some extensive and easy jumps, which would be your longer stretch shortening cycle work. This could be things just like simple jump squats, it could be lateral jumps, etc. And you're gonna pair those. I typically like to do 20 reps for the ankle pop stuff, and I typically like to do 10 reps for the jumps. And you do that in a circuit, typically about 5 to 6 exercises, and then you're gonna rest. And I like to do anywhere from 1 to 4 circuits. You're not gonna rest very long, 30 to 60 seconds. These are best placed at the beginning of your session. They make great warm-up. So after maybe your general warm-up of whatever you like to do, you can go straight into something like this, and it'll prepare you for the work for the rest of the session. You can also add an upper body work into this as well. For example, incline explosive push-ups that are relatively easy and various medicine ball throws. They all work really well within these kind of circuits. Now, when you move on to more intense jump variations, maybe like single jumps, for example, hopping over a box or hurdle, then quickly jumping over another one, or even just doing jumps like box jumps, you can still do these circuits as a way to prepare yourself for doing the more intense work. Or you can go through cycles where you move more into the intense stuff and then come back to the easier stuff. This way, you're not going to do so much where you're going to potentially increase your risk of injury. Now, actually, in this video right here, I run through my entire plyometric progression for you, exercise examples, and I show you all of them. So make sure you watch that, and that'll give you a better framework and how you can implement them into your program.